What if you could travel back in time and go to school with your parents? Would you be friends with your dad? Would you be in the same groups as your mom? What would you think of their journey from teenager to the grown-ups that they are now? These are some of the questions that inspired screenwriter Bob Gale to come up with one of the most creative and intriguing movies to come out of the 1980s. A story about time travel that ignored all the conventional wisdom of time travel movies before it. And the result catapulted itself to become a pop cultural phenomenon for years to come. Back to the Future is directed by Robert Zemeckis and stars Michael J. Fox, Christopher Lloyd, Lea Thompson, Crispin Glover, and Tom F. Wilson. It's the story of Marty Mcfly, who while helping his friend Doc Brown, inadvertently sends himself back to the year 1955, where he meets younger versions of his parents. Now Marty must team up with a younger version of Doc Brown in order to get back to his time and save the space-time continuum. I always had a sense that Back to the Future was kind of being changed as it went. I think the film initially started out as one thing, and then just kept changing gears as the production moved forward. And I don't know if the finished product was what was initially intended. I know there were two key things that did change. One being the idea of what the space-time continuum looks like. Production designers came up with some great artwork as to what traveling through time would look like. During that process, writer Bob Gale decided that they didn't really need any of that, and that time travel should be instantaneous. So all that production work just kind of went away. Another was the ending. The original ending saw Marty and Doc going to a desert to a nuclear bomb testing site, theorizing that the nuclear reaction would generate the 1.21 gigawatts to send Marty back home. For cost reasons, that scene was cut and replaced with the ending we have now with the clock tower, which to me is 100 times better than the nuclear bomb ending. That is just one example of how this movie kind of ties up all the loose ends. Another case in point is the famous recasting of Marty McFly. Robert Zemeckis and Bob Gale originally wanted Michael J. Fox for the role. However, due to scheduling conflicts with his TV series Family Ties, he wasn't able to do it, so this led to the casting of Eric Stoltz by Universal. However, everyone felt that Stoltz's performance was not exactly what the role was calling for, so ultimately he was fired. Fortunately, the producers and the studio worked out a deal where Michael J. Fox could work on both Family Ties and Back to the Future, and Michael J. Fox was ultimately hired on for the role of Marty. I don't know exactly how much of the movie was filmed with Eric Stoltz and how much had to be reshot once Michael J. Fox came on, but I think it was quite a lot. I know there were key scenes at the mall when Marty travels back in time, and there's a lot of stuff with his parents that had to be reshot as well. But again, it's just another example of kind of changing on the fly like that. Now normally this would bother me if the finished product wasn't so good. Back to the Future is a modern day classic, and it is a movie that is still referenced to this day. The movie instantly skyrocketed to become a loved and cherished movie for generations. It is a near perfect movie. Every performance in that movie is just astounding. Crispin Glover really nailed the unsureness, the shy, the quirky George McFly. George McFly, at least the 1985 Prime version, is very timid and avoids confrontations. And Crispin Glover just really perfected that role. He was fantastic. And Lea Thompson was just great. The idea of her character, Marty's mom, falling in love with Marty was a very touchy subject during that time. Several studios didn't pick up the movie for that reason. Now on paper, the idea of a mom falling in love with her son is kind of shocking. But the reason that it ended up working in this movie was because of Lea Thompson's performance. She didn't play it to be gross. She played it exactly the way it was intended, as this young girl who meets this new boy in school and is immediately infatuated with him. She played the part just like a normal teenage girl. And Tom F. Wilson as Biff is just phenomenal. What he was able to do with that character was just amazing. He was the classic bully. Whenever anybody uses the term bully, you cannot not think of Biff Tannen. There were never talks of a sequel during the production of the first Back to the Future movie. But if there were, I'm not sure Biff Tannen was originally going to be a part of the series. But when talks of a sequel were first being thrown around and Tom Wilson's portrayal of the character was so well received, he was immediately brought back for the other movies. But of course the stars of the movie are Michael J. Fox and Christopher Lloyd. Their on-screen chemistry is just amazing. You really feel that you were watching two best friends on the screen. Michael J. Fox was brilliant. His reactions to the unfamiliar, being a kid from the 1980s and sent back to 1955, wondering why things were different, why can't I do this, why can't I do that. His reactions were genuine to everything around him. His view of his dad, his mom having the hots for him, his reactions were just priceless and perfect. But hands down, my favorite character is Doc Brown. Christopher Lloyd just really nailed that performance. He will forever be remembered for that role. Like Michael J. Fox, his reactions are just brilliant. He is essentially the core of the movie. Everyone is relying on him to solve the issues, and he kind of pushes the movie forward, forcing Marty to come to terms with his decisions and to make things right. I don't know if I've ever seen a movie with such a positive outcome, and I don't mean that in terms of critically successful or financially successful, but I'm talking about a movie that just ends on such a high note. Every character's journey ends on a high note. When you first meet George and Lorraine at the beginning of the movie, George is timid and afraid of confrontation and kind of an errand boy for his boss, Biff. And Lorraine is an alcoholic who generally seems unhappy. But when George stands up to Biff and alters history, their lives change for the better. They're happy, successful, and even their kids' lives have changed for the better. Doc, who we're meant to believe is an unsuccessful inventor, experiences the joy of creating something that works. When he sends Marty back to his present time, my favorite shot of the movie is Doc running down the street between the fire tracks, just filled with joy with what he accomplished. And the music begins to swell. It's just a great scene. On a side note, Alan Silverstein's musical score for this movie is fantastic. His scores have always invoked an emotion, and hearing the Back to the Future theme just brings me back to when I was a kid watching it for the first time. At the beginning of the movie, Marty is turned down playing for the school dance, and he ends up telling his girlfriend he has fears of rejection or being turned away. And we see he is on a familiar path that his father was once on. But after George knocks out Biff and Marty volunteers to fill in for the guitar player, he's able to fulfill his dreams and finally play for the band in front of the school. Time travel movies are always difficult because no matter what, they always get it wrong. And as much as I love Back to the Future, I still have some issues with the time paradoxes that movie sets up. When Marty first meets Doc at the mall, the name of the mall is the Twin Pine Mall, a reference to Old Man Peabody, who owned a farm of pine trees. When Marty traveled back in time and takes out one of the pine trees, the name of the mall at the end is now called Lone Pine Mall. Now, if that's the case, then the 1955 that Marty travels to is a post-Marty Prime 1955. Marty already having altered history. But Marty doesn't know about Doc reading his letter and wearing a bulletproof vest, so it's assumed that Marty would travel back early yet again to warn Doc, which would create a time loop. But the fact that the mall is now called the Lone Pine Mall and not the Twin Pine Mall means that the effects that Marty had on 1955 haven't taken effect yet, and that just means that this Marty now traveling point is that Bob Gale and Robert Zemeckis realized that this is a movie about time paradoxes or hardware, which is why the world-famous DeLorean time machine isn't featured all that much in this movie. The DeLorean, although a fantastic piece of cinema and pop culture, is just a device to keep the film going. It's just to propel the story. This is a movie about people and taking chances. This movie doesn't ask the questions of, if you could travel back in time and change one thing about your life, what would it be? It asks the question of, would you? It's the fact that every little thing has an effect on your life, no matter how small or how big, shapes you to the person that you become. And by altering just one little thing, changes the rest of you. Back to the Future spawned an entire franchise, 2 sequels, an animated series, a ride at Universal Studios, and a video game by Telltale. The 4th movie was talked about for years, having all the original cast return, but honestly I kind of hope that they don't make one. The Back to the Future trilogy ended in such a great way. Everyone is happy, lives have been changed for the better, and everyone has grown as a person. The end of the trilogy is just so satisfying to watch, and it put Back to the Future in the hearts of so many moviegoers that will forever remember it. Thanks for watching, guys. Be sure to comment below, let me know what you think of Back to the Future, and I will see you in the next episode of Hollywood Classics.